Welcome back. This is Jess, and I have a super special guest today. I want to welcome one of my best friends. We actually met freshman year of college at NYU. This is Andy Bellatti. Say hello.
Hello, everybody. Hey, Jess. I was just waiting for my cue.
You may now speak.
Why, thank you.
Introduce yourself. I mean, you are an astrologer. You have your own astrology reading business.
That's right.
astrologywithandy.com or
yes.
at astrologywithandy on Instagram. And tell everybody, like, when did you first start learning about astrology and then doing it professionally?
Well, it's funny because I grew up in a household where my mom was into astrology in a very mainstream way. She actually now is an astrologer back home in Argentina herself.
Oh, wow.
She's taken 9 years of schooling, like very, very seriously. But when I grew up, she had a passing interest. But I remember being 6 years old and there being, astrology books at home. So at age 6, I knew I was a Gemini. And one time when I was 7, we went to some shopping center and they were doing generic printouts of your sign. And I wanted that. And then what happened is that when I was 14, for my birthday, we were living in Venezuela at the time. And for my birthday, I asked my parents that I wanted a legit birth chart reading. And that was my first introduction to what I call real astrology, where it's not just about your sun sign, it's your entire chart. And this woman who did my chart, she just said things about me that even at age 14, I knew were so true. And that she would not have said about a general 14-year-old. And then what happened is, I went to college, and then my first year of college is when I started really getting an interest in my own birth chart. Because back then, there were some good websites where you could create your own birth chart. And then I started learning more about how you actually read a birth chart. And then what happened is, a few years after that, I had a few mentors who were guiding me. But the best way to learn is actually by doing people's charts. But I didn't know enough to be charging money. So what I would do is I was working full-time in an office, and word got out that I did astrology readings. And I told people, look, take me out to lunch, pay for my lunch, I'll do your chart. And in that way, in a few years, I did like 200 readings.
Oh, wow.
And that was the absolute best. I mean, on top of that as well, I was also reading more and more. And I had some mentors who I would email with. But now, I've been now reading birth charts for 18 years. But it wasn't until 2019, 17 years later, that I felt like, okay, now I know enough and I can actually do a business. Because also I had clients who were telling me, you need to turn this into a business. And here I am.
Amazing. Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. So this goes back to when you were just a kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've just always been into it. And I love astrology. I think also once people get a birth chart reading, they understand. A lot of my clients are people who have never had a birth chart reading before.
Uh-huh.
And the comment I always get is, wow, I didn't realize it got this deep, or wow, I didn't know this much went into it. Because most people's exposure to astrology is just your sun sign. But that's like 1/100th of what it's about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that was how I first got into astrology, was through you. Yeah. Through our conversations, that it really, I mean, I always knew I was a Leo. I think I knew of a rising sign, but I didn't know what mine was. I certainly didn't know what a moon sign meant. So let's sort of give the listeners like a roadmap of what's going to happen in this episode. Well, first of all, so of course you are an astrologer, but you also have another career as a Housewives superfan.
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
I moonlight as a Housewives superfan.
I mean, you are a super fan.
And especially, I gotta say, I'm a super fan of like the OGs, like seasons 1 to 3 of RHONY and Jersey. I have watched each episode easily 30 times. I can quote scenes from season 1 of New York.
Oh, you've quoted scenes today with me.
Right. Yeah. You're packing a bag. You're running. You're packing a bag. You're going to Miami. I see you packing a red bag.
Exactly. Okay, so we just got your street cred.
I'm legit. I'm verified.
You've just been vetted. So what I thought would be great for this first episode with you, and like we'll definitely have you back and like focus on different housewives as they're airing.
I am now the out in the wild resident astrologer.
You are going to be the resident astrologer. New York is about to premiere. Mm-hmm. I thought it would be great if we focused on Dorinda, Bethenny, and Ramona.
Got it. Okay.
Let's like figure out where they are, how they got here, and also where they're going in the next year. Just I want to hear your astrological take. And then separately after we do that, since we're in the thick of Vanderpump airing, I'm so curious if you could do like, I know you did a relationship chart for me. I think it would be cool if we looked at the relationships between Jax and Brittany versus Tom and Ariana.
Yes, and they're very different.
Oh, I'm sure.
Very.
So, I mean, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, okay. So the one disclaimer I will make about these charts is that for all of these people, I don't have time of birth.
Yeah.
Here's what that means.
Yeah.
All that means is that I can read about 75% of the chart. What I always say is that if you just look at your sun sign, it's like looking at something at 1x. If I know when you were born, not your time, but just the date, I can zoom in like 50x. If I have your time of birth, I can do 100x. So we can still get some good details, but there's a few things that if I knew their times, I could get even more specific, but we have enough to go on here. But just so people know, when they get a reading with me, you do need to have your time of birth so I can do...
And the exact city as well.
Yeah, correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, for these people, I know where they were born. I'm just missing the time. Right. That's the one detail. But yeah, when you get a reading with me, I need date, time, and location.
Should we also explain to people the difference between sun, moon, and rising?
Good point. Because I don't have times, I don't know rising signs.
Oh, right. Okay.
But as I talk about this, I'll explain what each thing means as we go through.
Awesome. Okay.
Should we start with Ramona?
Let's start with Ramona. Yeah.
So, Ramona, and again, FYI, because for each person, I could do an hour. But for the interest of time, this is like a mini reading.
Yeah.
I just want people to know that if they get a reading with me, you're talking to me for an hour and a half. This is like the super express Cliff Notes, just so people know, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So a few things that I teased out from Ramona's chart. So one is that she has her sun conjunct Mercury. Let me break that down. Okay, conjunct just means right next to. In astrology, when two things are right next to each other, they really influence each other. So the sun represents your sense of self and your identity.
That's the sign that, like, what your sign. Like, you knew you were a Gemini. I know that I'm a Leo. I actually know that she's a Scorpio because I'm so sick. I know that she and Bethenny are both Scorpios.
They are, yes, yeah. Totally. But this is where I always say to my clients, this is where the magic happens, because these things that we're talking about, how the planets are communicating to each other, these are called aspects. And this is why Bethenny and Ramona, yes, they're both Scorpios, but this is why they're different. They have different aspects in their chart. Ramona has the sun conjunct Mercury. Mercury is about communication and speech and getting your thoughts out. When you have the sun and Mercury right next to each other, you have somebody who has kind of diarrhea of the mouth. Also, Mercury is about your mind and your thoughts. So somebody who has a lot of racing thoughts, somebody who probably doesn't slow down to think, somebody who has no filter, that's very Sun Mercury right next to each other. I mean, these are like right on top of each other in Ramona's chart. She also has her Sun square Pluto. Square means they're 90 degrees away from each other. So here's an interesting thing too. In a birth chart, the Sun represents your father. Pluto is about dominance and power. It can also be abuse. Here's the thing.
I mean, we all know that that's her story with her father.
Right. Here's the thing. A square aspect is considered a challenging aspect. 9.9 times out of 10, when I have a client who has Sun square Pluto, I always ask them, was your father a despot? Which means, like a tyrant who ruled with an iron fist. And they always tell me, oh, beyond. Sun square Pluto people have major issues because they grew up with fathers who just controlled them and dominated them, and they felt like they were under their parents' shadow, under their father's shadow. And what that does is one of two things. When you have a square aspect like this one, you either identify more with Pluto, and then you become, in your own adult life, a bully, or you identify more with the sun and you start attracting people who are like that into your life. And somebody who has this aspect therefore has to learn how to balance that, how to not be a doormat, but also how to not be a bully themselves.
So do you think that part of this is why she left Mario when he cheated? Like why she didn't stick it out? Because she could have forgiven him, but she essentially refused to be a doormat.
What that tells me is that she has worked that out. I always tell my clients, your birth chart is a blueprint, and that's the energy that is your default if you don't work on your issues. But as you gain experience and wisdom, you go to therapy, whatever it is, you can correct these things and balance them out. But when you have a square, that is something you have to work on consciously daily to not get stuck in that dynamic. So I think Ramona leaving Mario and not putting up with being cheated on is her traversing that Sun-Pluto square in her chart, which can get really intense. Sun-Pluto square people, if they're not careful, they can just be victims for their whole life.
So Ramona has been infamously criticized by fellow housewives alike. I mean, also like my own self, I have had like personally, like I witnessed her kick Giselle Bryant out of that photo that went viral. Dolores Catania came on this podcast and, just completely trashed her, how she kicked these other guys out of photos. What is this about?
Well, my next note, she has Mercury square Pluto as well. Mercury, again, is your communication, how you communicate. When it squares Pluto, it usually gives somebody who has to control everybody and can be like a bulldozer. So Mercury square Pluto people, what they need to learn is compromise, how to talk to people in a way that is very nice. Now, I will say in Ramona's defense, when you have this aspect, what happens is that in your mind, you just told somebody, hey, good morning. But what the other person said is fuck off. And what I always tell my clients who have Mercury Pluto challenging aspects is you have to understand that what you consider a normal way of speaking is way too intense and way too aggressive. So my clients who have this aspect, I always remind them that they need to like bring the intensity down to a 5 or to a 4 because they're at a 20. But that explains why Ramona, and she has the Sun conjunct Mercury. So she has this Mercury in her chart that the way she communicates is just, there's no filter. And I will say, I don't think she's mean on purpose, but the way it comes out if she's not conscious is that she has no regard for anybody. So she needs to work on that. And I always tell my clients too, this is not an excuse to be a raging asshole and say, well, I have Mercury square Pluto, I can't help it. No, it's like once you know it, you need to work on that shit so you're not an awful person to be around.
Yeah.
And finally, to wrap this up, the moon. So the moon represents what do we need to feel emotionally safe, emotionally nourished. Ramona has her moon in Taurus. So a few things here. Sun in Scorpio, moon in Taurus. These two signs are opposite each other. When you have the sun and the moon in different signs, sun is father, moon is mother, you usually grew up in a family dynamic where mom and dad did not get along at all. And then you start internalizing that and you start feeling very conflicted because you feel like to please my mom, I have to like be more like this, and to please my dad, I have to be more of that. And you start feeling almost like a divided person. That's number one. But moon in Taurus, what they need to feel emotionally safe is stability. And for them, money, it's not about showing off. Money is about feeling safe. Somebody like Ramona with her moon in Taurus, finances, it's not about just living an amazing life. It's like, that's how she gets her sense that she's okay and safe.
That actually, I've never heard somebody talk about Ramona in that way, and that actually makes complete sense. I mean, she's entirely self-made. Like, I think from a young age, she knew that I think she was like a buyer for some luxury brand or like a consign. I don't know. She was a buyer.
She was buying like clothes from some and then selling them at a lower price.
Yeah,
right? That was like season 1, RHONY.
But that was also her career, like well before. Like she was self-made, like years and years before she married Mario and before she ever started the show. Like she owned that apartment and owned her home in the Hamptons with no fame. Like, I mean, I'm just interpreting what you're saying. It makes sense.
Totally moon in Taurus. And by the way, just remember, her first tagline was, I love making money. It's an aphrodisiac. Well, you know what's so funny? Taurus is ruled by Venus. And Venus is all about like aphrodisiacs and sensuality. And to have the moon in Taurus means that. Like for her also, there's that aspect of it. It is an that's actually true. It's not just like some made up tagline that somebody gave for her. It's so moon in Taurus.
Oh my God. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
So that's a wrap on Ramona for now?
I would say so. I will say, she's going to have some changes coming up 2024, 2025. She's going to have a once-in-a-lifetime transit. And what I mean by that is that where the planet Uranus will be in 2024 and 2025 will be exactly opposite where her sun was when she was born. Happens once in a lifetime. And that's going to be a time of immense change for Ramona. Uranus opposite your sun, lasts about a year, is a time of unexpected changes. These are not changes that you are seeking necessarily or making yourself. Things around you are shifting very quickly.
What do you mean?
Not sick. No, but it could be that maybe she meets somebody very suddenly and that becomes a significant relationship, or there's a sudden breakup, or she decides to move out of New York and move to LA. I mean, it's that kind of change.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be anything bad. But usually when Uranus opposes your sun, you're reacting to external events. You're not really making the change internally.
Oh,
it's one of maybe somebody says, I don't know, there's an awesome opportunity for some kind of gig if you move to Vancouver, whatever it might be. And she's like, why not? I'll take it. Like that would be very much the energy during that time.
Very cool. Should we step over to Bethenny since she's also a Scorpio?
Yeah, because she has very different energy. So, Ramona had the sun conjunct Mercury. Bethenny has the sun conjunct, again, right next to Jupiter. Jupiter has to do with a few things. One is luck. Jupiter rules luck. And I feel like Bethenny has been, don't get me wrong, she's very talented and very savvy, but she also has had a lot of lucky breaks. She even said the way she got casted on Housewives is she was with Jill Zarin, who I love. I say that with love, right? But she was at Polo, and the producers were like, we want you. And she was like, no, no, no. And look at her now. As a result of that, she is the most successful housewife of all time.
Yeah.
That is Jupiter. Jupiter is about being in the right place at the right time. People who have sun conjunct Jupiter tend to always land on their feet.
And she was also at the right place, the right time with Skinny Girl.
Exactly. See, and people who have the sun conjunct Jupiter have a very high likelihood of being very successful. Because Jupiter is also about abundance. Jupiter is about always expanding. I'm not surprised that Bethenny went from, being kind of a nobody and just being the runner-up on Martha Stewart Apprentice to now being a household name.
Yeah.
Very sun conjunct Jupiter. She also has Jupiter conjunct Mercury. So her speech, that's why I think Bethenny also is such a good speaker, because Mercury, her planet of communication, is right next to Jupiter. And Jupiter expands. So it gives her communication an audience. It brings her out. And Jupiter is also very jokey. Jupiter has to do with humor. That's why, Bethenny is not a downer. Even when she's maybe telling a story that's intense, she's always adding a silver lining. I'm not surprised that somebody who wrote a book called The Place of Yes has Mercury conjunct Jupiter, because Jupiter is about optimism and faith and having hope. Moon in Capricorn. So, like Ramona's moon, it's an earth sign. So again, Bethenny seeks stability. But Capricorn is about achievement. So what Bethenny needs to feel emotionally okay is achievement and success, less so than money. There's nothing in her chart showing that she's money hungry, but she needs to always feel like she's climbing the ladder and always going for more. Also, when you have the moon in Capricorn, you have a mother who is emotionally absent, and you have somebody who, as a child, because Capricorn is about responsibility, and the moon in Capricorn is usually a child who had to fend for themselves from a young age. Like, a client, all my clients who have this, you have like somebody who at 10 years old was watching after their 4-year-old sister because mom was working. The 12-year-old who could cook a meal because the parents weren't home. There's usually something where at a very young age, you were doing things that were really adult and you had to grow up really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, she talks about that. She says that she was raised by wolves.
Yeah. And just to be, but it's one of the things where even if I had never read a single sentence of a Bethenny book or heard her talk, it's so in her chart.
Yeah.
It's like, Yeah. She also has Mars conjunct Uranus. So Uranus is very volatile energy. Uranus rules things like lightning and earthquakes and electricity. It's very sudden. Mars is aggression and assertion. It's the gas pedal. So when you have Mars, which is like this fireball right next to Uranus, the lightning bolt, it gives somebody who goes after what they want and who can very easily go from 0 to 100. Mars conjunct Uranus people, on the one hand, they're very hard to knock down because they will just go for what they want. They will not apologize for it. And they're also very good at, Uranus is also a planet that's about creativity. and being ahead of the curve. Not surprised.
Yeah.
Right? But what they have to watch is that, again, this combination can just get too explosive. So people who have Mars conjunct Uranus, my clients who have that, I always tell them, have something in your life that grounds you, because otherwise you will burn yourself out.
Do you think that stability is coming from Paul, her boyfriend?
I think so. Yeah.
And also from her daughter.
Absolutely. And I think, and I get the sense that Bethenny is very self-aware. And I think as she's gone through her life, she's realized that she needed that she needs that. Because otherwise she can get into a tailspin and just kind of like the Tasmanian devil.
Yeah.
Just, not be able to slow down.
Is there anything in the chart, just in terms of like the timeline of like why she chose this moment to leave Housewives?
Yes. So what was happening in her chart in the summer of 2019 is that she had the planet Saturn, and I'll explain what that means in a second. She had Saturn very active. She had Saturn on top of her moon, and then she had Saturn contacting her sun, her Jupiter, her Mercury, and her Venus all in Scorpio. So here's the thing. Saturn plays a few roles. Saturn is about solidifying things. Saturn is a planet that asks you to cut out whatever in your life is either dragging you down or no longer serves a purpose. Saturn is a planet of trimming the fat. Saturn audits your life. So when you have a time in your life like Bethenny did in the summer of 2019, when Saturn is really active, what usually happens, the way that Saturn operates and why it kind of gets a bad rap that's undeserved, what Saturn does is that if something in your life is weighing you down, Saturn makes it suddenly feel like 2,000 pounds heavier. And it does that so you recognize, I don't want this anymore. So usually what happens is that Saturn brings a moment of you feeling overworked, overstressed, unhappy, but it does that so you can say, I need to get rid of this so you can move on. And that's what was happening in her chart last summer.
Wow. Anything in the chart about when she'll be coming back to Housewives?
Wouldn't hold my breath.
And what about relationships?
Well, one very interesting thing about Bethenny's relationships that I see in her chart. Okay, so when we look at relationships, I always look at Venus, because Venus, among other things, is about how are we in relationships. One thing is that, Bethenny has Venus and Scorpio. Bethenny has the Sun, Jupiter, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune all in Scorpio.
Oh my God.
That is a lot of Scorpio energy.
We always joke that Bethenny must be an utter nightmare to date.
And she says it herself. Right? She kind of...
Does she? I don't know.
I feel like I remember maybe way back, like in the first season of Bethenny Ever After, she was telling Jason, like, I'm damaged.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm broken, I'm damaged.
Yeah.
Right?
She has that many planets in Scorpio?
Yeah.
Holy
very Scorpio.
Shit.
So
My
Bethenny
God.
is very intense. The other thing, too, though, is that Bethenny has Venus opposite Saturn in her chart. When you have Venus opposite Saturn, what ends up happening is that in relationships, there's almost like a blockage as far as being able to be vulnerable and just let yourself be. Because Saturn, when it's opposing Venus, Venus is about love and romance and just, it has no qualms showing themselves or showing up romantically. When Saturn opposes Venus, it's kind of like it sets up this huge hurdle. So I think one of the things that happens in Bethenny's chart is that she can have a hard time tapping into that Venus energy that just isn't intense and that just goes with the flow romantically and isn't worrying about a million things in the relationship, isn't trying to put everything into a category or into the right place.
Yeah.
And that's the thing she has. And all of it, by the way, too, usually Saturn opposite Venus gives people who feel massively insecure in relationships. I always tell my clients, a lot of times these things are more prominent when we're younger, late teens, early 20s. I like to think that Bethenny also seems very self-aware, so she's probably worked on this. But I think one thing she's had to work on is her massive insecurity of not feeling good enough in a relationship.
Wow.
The last thing I want to say about Bethenny's chart. So in astrology, we look at what are called the nodes, North Node and South Node. They are not planets. They're calculated based on the moon and the sun's orbit. Here's what they represent. The South Node represents things that you've mastered in past lives. The North Node are things that are new in this lifetime that you have to master in order to evolve, to be your best self. If you don't start integrating the North Node, you get into a hamster wheel where you keep running into the same problems. Bethenny's South Node, what she's mastered already and does not need to work on in this lifetime, is in Leo. Leo is the spotlight. Yeah. Leo is me standing out from the crowd. I don't want to be a part of anything. It's me. Her North Node is in Aquarius. Aquarius is belonging to a group, being part of an ensemble without needing to shine, without needing to be the star. That's her thing that she needs to integrate and work on in her life, is to not feel the need to stand out and be queen bee.
Oh, that's so interesting.
So the more she's able to just be part of a group and just blend into it, that's what her chart is asking her to do.
I love it. All right, should we move on to Dorinda?
Let's do it.
Because Dorinda is like a little bit of a mystery. Because on the show, she's like a little bit all over the place.
Such an interesting... This chart, when I saw it, I just went, wow. Okay. Just like Ramona, she has her sun square Pluto. I have a feeling...
What is her sun sign?
Dorinda is a Sagittarius.
Okay.
Of course she is. Because Sagittarius is very life of the party. Sagittarius wants to have a good time. Very optimistic. Sagittarius loves to just have fun. You know, Sagittarius is the opposite of the Debbie Downer. Mm-hmm. And they also like to travel. They like to learn new things. It's a very good sign. Now, the one thing with Sagittarius they have to watch... There can also be a lot of denial with Sagittarius. They can deny reality. You know, Sagittarius has to watch, because this happens a lot. Like, their house is on fire, and somebody says, your house is burning, and they go, oh, no, it's fine. It's just a little fire. Don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. You know, so sometimes Sagittarius needs to just kind of be like, please assess the reality of what's happening, because shit is going down. But just like Ramona, she has her sun square Pluto. I believe, do we know about her father? I suspect she probably had a very
I don't know.
domineering father.
Okay.
And I suspect that Dorinda has identified more with Pluto in her own life. Because, you know, she calls the shots. She doesn't strike me as like a shy doormat.
Well, yeah, she ruled the entire relationship with John, which I want to get into later.
Yeah.
As to like why now she broke up with him after 7 years.
So the thing with her is that she just has to watch, again, that dynamic where... Because Pluto square sun people can either be the victim or the bully who calls all the shots. And sometimes simultaneously, where they might have, you know, with this friend, I'm totally passive, and then with my boyfriend, I'm totally domineering. They always have to find the balance. Now, one thing she has in her chart, and this is explosive, she has, and I'll explain what this means in a minute, Uranus, Pluto, and Mars all right next to each other. You cannot have more explosiveness in a chart. Uranus is the lightning bolt, Pluto is intensity, and Mars is anger. This is why Dorinda, I think, can be so intense and can just go from 0 to 500. And she has to watch this because what's happening in her chart is that Uranus, Pluto, and Mars, which is like, you know, kerosene and a match, are squaring her sun. What that means is that what she needs to learn is how to balance all that. Because if they weren't squaring her sun, if they were doing a trine, which is a 120-degree angle, she'll be able to infuse her personality with intensity and assertiveness in a way that wasn't combative. But a square is like planets kind of, you know, literally squaring off. Right? And what you have to learn there is how do you balance them. But there's a lot of explosive energy here.
And are you able, like, what does it say about her romantic life? I mean, like, she was obviously married before to Richard. He passed away. And she's been in this relationship with John pretty much ever since he died. Like, shortly after he died, she started dating him. She suddenly, I guess, or not so suddenly, ended the relationship. We'll see this season. What did her chart say about that?
First, let me talk about her chart and relationships, and then I'll tell you what's been happening. So, Dorinda's Venus is very challenged. Venus is our capacity to love and how do we operate in relationships. And a challenged Venus doesn't mean that you're never going to be in a relationship, obviously, but it means there's a lot of issues you have to be very conscious of. She has Venus conjunct, again, right next to Neptune. So, you know, Neptune is about, when it's right next to a planet, it's about delusions. It's about attracting people who are broken, people who have addictions a lot of times, people who might gaslight you. Venus spews a mist or a fog that makes things very confusing. So when you have Neptune conjunct Venus, on the one hand, Neptune is what it's called the higher octave of Venus, meaning that it's like Venus times 100. So Neptune is very empathetic, very loving. It's about unconditional love. But the thing to watch when you have Neptune right next to Venus is that you can be way too forgiving of people in your relationships. You can deny reality, where somebody is acting in a way that is not appropriate. And you're like, no, but they don't really mean that. They're so sweet. And you have to watch attracting people who are broken. People who have Neptune conjunct Venus like Dorinda can be martyrs, where they suddenly take on somebody thinking that they're supposed to fix them. It can be very unhealthy. And then the other thing is that she has Neptune and Venus opposite Jupiter. What happens there is there can be a lot of denial about what's really happening in a relationship. So what Dorinda needs is either things like therapy or couples therapy or friends who can give her the real lowdown. Because I think with this kind of chart, it can be very easy to get lost in the fairy tale and completely overlook red flags. You know, there's that saying that when you wear rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like flags. And that's Dorinda's chart.
Wow.
Another thing about her chart, moon in Aries. The moon is, again, what do we need to feel emotionally safe and how do we emotionally react? The moon in Aries is very impulsive. It wants everything now. Actually, it wants it yesterday. It's very impatient. Also, though, moon in Aries, they need independence. Do not crowd them. Do not tell them what to do. They need independence because that's just what she needs. So Dorinda,
that makes sense. She never lived with John.
There we go. Yeah. So, I mean, her chart is, you know, that's why I'm saying, like, Dorinda's chart makes it very clear, you know, this is somebody who needs their space, but she has a tremendous capacity to love. This Venus-Neptune thing, once you deal with it, it makes you a terrific partner because you're not judgy. You accept people for who they are. You have radical acceptance. But until you massage it out, you can end up with some people who just are not healthy for you.
All right. So let's move over to Vanderpump. The children. And this, I really want to get into Jax and Brittany and Tom and Ariana. And also Jax and Tom. Like how they are, you know, these are, as the title of the episode went, ex-best friend, ex-best man. Yeah.
Tear. Okay, so let me just explain to the viewers how a relationship reading works. When I do this, I do two charts. One is called synastry. Synastry is I compare two people's charts and you look at, you know, what is person A's moon doing to person B's Saturn. So it's a chart comparison. You also do what's called a composite chart. A composite chart is a mathematical average of two charts. It creates a third new chart that is considered the chart of the relationship, meaning what is this relationship meant to teach both people, or what's supposed to be the evolution of the relationship. So I look at both.
Wow. Wait, so are you able to tell, can you tell by doing one of these composite charts how long a relationship is going to last?
No, but I can definitely tell when a relationship will be tested. So the thing with astrology I always tell people is that there are some limitations because it is very interesting. The same astrological transits that point to an engagement are the same ones that would point to a breakup. Because in both cases, all I see as an astrologer is this is the time when the relationship is going through a massive change. It's a make or break period. And that could mean that people say, we want to take this further and get engaged, or they say, it's not working, we're breaking up. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, so there are some limits because sometimes what happens is that when relationships are tested, they become stronger and people are like, holy shit, I now feel so much closer to you.
Right.
But as an astrologer, I always tell people, you know, I'm not psychic. I'm not Teresa Caputo. I'm not communicating with your dead grandma.
Right.
I'm not doing any of that, right? There's no crystal ball. I'm not Miss Cleo. You know, it's just a chart. So there are some limitations, but I can definitely tell when a relationship might be going through a period of tests.
All right. Do you want to first do Jax and Brittany?
Yes. Let's do Jax and Brittany.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk about Jax and Britt. Another disclaimer I want to make. I will never look at a chart and tell people you should not be together. What I can tell people is if you want to be together, just understand there's going to have to be significant compromises in this relationship.
Yeah.
And if there isn't very good communication, this can go off the rails very quickly. So I will never tell people they can't be together, but I'm realistic. Jax and Britt fall into the latter category. I'm not saying they're doomed. I don't do that kind of astrology. I will never do that. But their charts are just, the energy is so different between them that
it is, yeah.
If they came to see me, I'd be like, okay, here's what you need to know. So first of all, Jax has his moon in Aquarius and Brittany has it in Virgo. When I look at relationship readings...
So this is their moon sign.
Their moon
What
signs.
they need emotionally from a relationship to feel good.
Correct. When I look at a relationship reading, I don't care about your sun signs. They mean nothing to me.
Okay.
Nothing. I don't care. The moon sign is key. Because in this case, here's what's happening with them. Virgo and Aquarius are 150 degrees away from each other. That's called the quincunx. It's the hardest aspect to have in a relationship between two moons. And here's why. Sure, a square and an opposition are challenging. But at least a square and an opposition, they have some things in common. They might disagree on a lot, but there's some commonality.
Well, yeah, they talk about loving junk food and loving, like, watching Friends. It seems like they agree on all the superficial stuff.
But emotionally, it's a different thing. When
Yeah.
you have the moon quincunx in our person's moon, it's almost like emotionally that person feels like from another planet, and you don't even understand why they would feel a certain way. But you can get past it. I've had clients who've been married 20 years who have this aspect. It doesn't spell doom, but it spells like you need to really step out of your comfort zone and really make an effort to understand your partner, because the moon in Aquarius, Jax, that is a moon that prefers to run away from conflict. It doesn't want to get into
Jax
weeds.
prefers to run away from conflict?
Makes him very uncomfortable. Now, you got to understand, though.
He's so aggressive.
But you got to understand, but yes. But see, this to me is interesting because they're filming a show where if he runs away from conflict, he'll have no scenes to film.
Okay.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Keep
Meaning
going.
that emotionally, he'd rather not go there. Let's not forget that when Sandoval brought up the topic, he's like, I'm not talking about this, and he
brought
left.
up the pastor, yeah.
Yeah.
Could this be also why Jax has cheated on every single girlfriend?
Yes.
It's his way of running away.
Totally. And the moon here's the thing. The moon in Aquarius, they detach. The moon in Aquarius is like, I'm over this person. I'm just out. There's no like, let's talk about our feelings for 2 hours so I can tell you. The moon in Aquarius says, I'm out. See you never.
This makes sense. Yeah.
They ghost you. Wow. Now, again, though, let's be clear. This is the moon in Aquarius at its worst, right? So if a client came to me with the moon in Aquarius, it doesn't mean you're going to be a dick and ghost people because you have this. I tell you how to work on it. But there's a very unevolved Aquarius moon. Brittany's Virgo moon, in the meantime, the way that she feels safe is by knowing what's going to happen next, what's going on. The moon in Virgo needs control, and they need predictability. The moon in Aquarius is very stifled by predictability. They need freedom. So these are two people who are going to need to really come into some kind of compromise of how does Brittany feel safe without feeling like she's in the middle of chaos? How does Jax not feel chained down?
How? Tell us how.
I'm not a therapist. I'm just saying. I'm just the astrologer. The other thing, too, is that, but here's the thing that they have. Jax's moon is square Brittany's Pluto. This makes for a very magnetic relationship, a very codependent relationship. And when you have Pluto squaring somebody else's moon, the moon person, Jax, because Brittany has the Pluto here, feels very enthralled by the Pluto person and feels like if they were to break up, I think he would still be kind of obsessed with her.
Really?
Yes. The Pluto person occupies space in the moon person's mind.
Interesting.
And it gives a dynamic that is very hard to break up fully. There's an aspect where people can be very unhappy and still be together because of moon Pluto. because it's almost like this, almost like an octopus. You know how like an octopus just brings something in and squeezes it? It's that kind of energy. Also, Jax's Venus is opposite Brittany's Saturn. A tough aspect for Jax because, so again, Venus is, how do we love, our capacity to love and affection. When somebody else's Saturn opposes your Venus or your moon or your sun, for the Venus person, for Jax, I think Brittany can feel like a buzzkill at times.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Even though she just wants to go to Hooters and do shots?
Right, but that's not like your Venus. That's her having fun, but I think as far as like maybe the way that Jax wants to express affection, I get the sense that with this, maybe Brittany isn't always in the mood for that, or maybe turns him down at times, or rejects his advances. Again, let's remember, we're not with these people 24/7.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Interesting.
But also, on the flip side, Saturn is about commitment, and Saturn is about settling down. So when somebody's Saturn aspects your Venus, they're the person with whom you realize you have to grow the fuck up. So I feel like through Brittany, Jax had to realize that he had to get his shit together because she brings the Saturn into the relationship. She actually brings like the adulting. She brought adulting to Jax. But in a way, it's an opposition. I don't think it was easy. Well, we know it wasn't easy. Yeah. But, just based on the astrology.
Very, very good.
And now let's talk about their composite chart. This is the chart of their relationship.
Oh,
we just talk about the synastry, how they interact with each other.
Okay.
Their composite chart. So, they have the sun opposite Pluto, which tells me that this is always going to be a relationship that will always have very intense moments. A sun opposite Pluto composite chart will never be a relationship where two people are just Netflix and chilling. There's going to be drama with sun opposite Pluto, and there's always going to be a high intensity in the relationship. They have Neptune trine the sun, which is a very nice aspect. The trine is 120 degrees, and it's two planets getting along. Neptune is about love and romance. So I think this is a relationship that, regardless of what happens, when you have Neptune trine the sun, it's almost like, at the end of the day, there is actually true love here.
Wow.
That can keep them together.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of drama with sun opposite Pluto, but Neptune trine sun is really nice. It's actually really, and they have Venus trine Uranus. So there's a relationship. Again, Uranus brings changes that the more unconventional they can be, the better for this relationship.
Even though they want kids in the house and that's their plan?
And that's fine. But because, I have clients who have this in their charts in their relationship, but they're people who still, need to travel, go skydiving. Like they can't get into.
Could the unconventional thing be that they obviously both have an addiction to being on TV? I could see if Vanderpump Rules ended next year, they would be on marriage boot camp, or I could see them continuing to. They have to. That's how they're going to make their income for the rest of their lives.
Totally. And Uranus rules television.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's very likely too. That could be unconventional. Absolutely. The two people in it are not working 9 to 5s in an office.
Yeah.
That's very
much. But they're just going to live their lives on reality television.
Totally. So, it's not. Their composite chart is better than the synastry. The synastry is challenging. This is a couple that I think if they can have couples therapy the first year or two of their marriage, it could work wonders, because I get the sense, no tea, no shade, that neither one is maybe super introspective and looking inward.
Right.
So, there's some people who I think would get it, but, they're not showing me a whole lot of growth and evolution.
Right.
So they're going to need that from the outside world.
Got it.
With
love, peace and love. Should we move on to Tom and Ariana?
Yes, because it's such a different energy. Tom and Ariana's synastry, for the most part, is wonderful. Wonderful.
Oh wow.
So Ariana's Venus sextiles 60-degree angle, harmonious, Tom's Sun. Venus Sun sextiles or trines in synastry are the best aspect you can have between two people, because it gives genuine affection. it gives warmth, and it gives friendship. It gives like a genuine friendship with this person. When you have Venus and the Sun getting along between two people's charts, they truly care for each other and want the best for each other. Venus and the Sun is not necessarily a super hot and sexy, passionate aspect, but it is like the, you know, if you're sick, I'll be here for you. If you're feeling down, I'll be here for you. There's that. Ariana's Mars sextiles Tom's Mercury. Mercury is communication, and Mars provides energy and vitality. So I feel like with this aspect, they have very good communication with each other. I feel like Tom is able to motivate Ariana because Tom's Mercury, his speech, what he says, awakens Ariana's Mars, which is vitality and energy and passion and assertiveness. So she needs Tom to wake up her Mars energy.
Yeah, that makes complete sense.
And then Ariana's Sun conjuncts Tom's Mars. Conjuncts meaning sits right on top of. This is a very good aspect for sexuality and passion. This is like an aspect that talks about being physically attracted to each other. So what's really nice is that they have a Venus-Sun contact of love and friendship, and then the Sun-Mars that is like, well, you're more than friends because you're like into each other and you find each other hot. Really nice. The one thing that they have to watch here or work on is that their moons are... Okay, two things. Their moons are in two signs that don't really see things the same way. Tom has a moon in Gemini. Ariana has it in Virgo. But the way they're placed in the chart, they're not even aspecting one another. So what happens here is that actually their moons, each person's moon here is not doing anything in the other person's chart.
So what can that mean?
This can mean that each person here can sometimes feel like their emotions are not validated or not understood fully. Now, in context, I think all these other aspects can help mitigate this a little bit. But Tom's moon in Gemini needs to talk things out all the time. Because Gemini is about talking. So the moon in Gemini, what do they need to feel emotionally safe? They need to have a conversation with you. And they need to know what you're thinking, and they tell you what they're thinking, blah, blah, blah. With her moon in Virgo, though, Ariana needs time to process things, and then she can talk. But that's going to be a sticking point, because I think Tom is more the person who, as soon as something comes up, he's like, let's talk about it right now. And Ariana's like, I need like a week to figure out what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and then I can talk to you. You know, so that's going to be one thing to keep in mind, because if not, what can happen is that Tom can feel not heard or not validated, because Ariana can be like, I'm not ready for this. But then Ariana can feel like her emotional needs are not respected, because she's like, dude, I said I need space.
You know, a lot of people put a microscope on their relationship because it is obvious that Tom is the type of guy that would typically want to get married and have a family and have kids. Whereas Ariana has been very vocal that she does not want to get married, does not want to have kids. Is there anything that you can see where, I mean, obviously Tom right now has compromised all of that, but can a relationship like this go the distance? Like, is there anything astrologically speaking that addresses this? Like, because these are two fundamental, like, it's almost like he says he doesn't want these things, but it's obvious that he does. He's just sacrificing and making this enormous compromise and sacrifice in order to be with Ariana.
So their composite chart shows that this can really go the distance, and here's why. Number one, in their composite chart, which is a chart of the relationship, you have, and this is very rare, the Sun, Mars, and Venus are all right next to each other. This is one of the aspects that's called like the classic marriage aspect. When you have this in a chart, it just means that there's so much love here. That's why people can make compromises without feeling resentful. But also what they have in their composite chart that is huge. Saturn is the glue in a relationship. You need Saturn contacts, especially positive ones. And in their composite chart, Tom and Ariana have the Sun trining Saturn, 120-degree angle, and Venus trining Saturn. And these two contacts are about going the distance. Because when Saturn is involved, you are willing to work on the relationship. When Saturn is involved like this, it's very hard for two people to throw in the towel, or it takes a lot. So I feel like no matter what, their number one goal for both of them will always be to make this work.
Interesting.
So who knows? Maybe Ariana will then compromise in a few. We never know.
Yeah,
but this is
true.
not a relationship where two people are just going to be like, you know what? F it. I'm done with this. That's not the vibe I get at all. At all.
Right. Was there anything else in their composite chart?
The only challenging aspect is the moon square Pluto. So with the moon square Pluto, what they have to watch is codependency. There can be codependency in this relationship because, again, moon Pluto squares can just get sometimes so intense that they need something to just lower the intensity for a second. You know, and I mean, given what's going on, what they really need is people around them who don't bring them drama.
Right.
So, you know, maybe they might wanna...
he's completely stopped talking to Jax.
Good.
Yeah. I think he says he hasn't even seen them since the wedding.
Yeah, because this relationship can be very easily tainted by intensity that comes from the outside that they're just absorbing from other people.
Yeah. Jax has gone on record saying that they are glorified roommates.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That Ariana and Tom?
Yeah. He has done interviews saying shit like that. Making gross remarks about Ariana's sexuality on the show and on Watch What Happens Live.
Yeah. And
that can't be good.
They can't have... No, with Moon Square Pluto, you have to really watch that. Because otherwise you get caught up in a lot of nonsense.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jax and Sandoval's synastry.
Yes.
Very interesting because it shows... You know, a synastry is a snapshot in time, so it doesn't tell me like, well, you know, in 1999, but it does tell me why a relationship can go sour and why it can start off beautifully.
Yeah, because they were best friends for, I think they've been really, they had been very close friends for like 15 years or something. I know that they had lived together in Miami. Remember, like Jax was living with that guy.
Yeah.
But they were like models together, and like maybe they even lived together in New York. Then they lived together for a while when they were in LA. But Jax is also the guy that fucked Kristen, his best friend's girlfriend. It's like somewhere along the line, like this went really, really bad. And they tried to like scotch tape the friendship together, but we're obviously at this point where...
Yeah, so, their moons are very compatible. Sandoval's moon in Gemini, Jax's moon in Aquarius. Those two moons, like I was saying earlier, when you have compatible moons, you just get each other. So you can form a bond very, very quickly because emotionally what you both need is very similar. So you're not trying to figure out this person where you're like, why are they acting like this? You get it. You understand each other. So good moon synastry can account for people getting along very well and just, having a very solid friendship. However, what's happening in this chart, and it's almost an exact aspect, is that Jax's Pluto squares Sandoval's Sun. That's a very challenging aspect to have with somebody because the Pluto person, Jax, tends to want to control and dominate and have the final say and steamroll over the Sun person, in this case Sandoval. And like anything else, there's going to be, at some point, if that's not checked, something will happen that just the straw that breaks the camel's back. Pluto, Sun squares in synastry. However, what also happens with Pluto, anytime Pluto is involved, you have to understand that it's like to really detach yourself from the relationship, it's like getting out of a python's grip. You can do it, but it's very difficult.
It's going to be difficult for the two of them to extricate from each other?
Well, now they might, but think about to your point, like when Jax, slept with Kristen, you would have thought that would have been the final straw.
Right.
But yet he's the best man in the wedding.
Right.
That's what I mean, that when you have a Pluto square with somebody in synastry, it takes a million straws to break the camel's back. And then finally something does. But that's why...
And it seems like, according to Jax, it was the fact that he brought this pastor stuff up again in front of the cameras, and that's why Jax was pissed. Because he was turning it into an even bigger storyline than it was already.
But again, that is Jax playing the Pluto here and calling all the shots. And just kind of being very Plutonian, very much like, it's my way or the highway. which really I think is ridiculous. I mean, of course he's going to bring it up for why wouldn't he bring it up for the cameras?
Right.
Right? But, what really struck me was that scene where they were sitting outside by the dumpster. So
yeah, the Sir dump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because, they
because they weren't looking. Yeah, they were looking like both straight ahead.
Yes. Because they both have their moons in air signs. Air signs are fine communicating their emotions because air signs are about communication and the moon is about your emotions. They don't mind talking about emotions, but feeling emotions is a whole other ballgame. So when you have your moon in Aquarius like Jax or the moon in Gemini like Tom, talking about it feels safe. But looking somebody in the eye and maybe seeing that they're hurt or maybe really letting them see that you're hurt, that's more difficult. If you had a moon in Cancer or a moon in Pisces, you would be all about it. So I can see why when two people with their moon in an air sign have to address an issue, they're fine sitting next to each other, but they kind of avoid eye contact because that's a little bit too hard for them. And that's why I think we saw that.
Very interesting. Can we talk about Ariana's depression and or basically what do you see in her chart that she was going through? I guess they must have filmed that in June 2019. So I'm curious if maybe you can talk about what's coming up, what was Ariana going through at that time, astrologically speaking, and also where is she going to be over the course of 2020?
Yeah. So when I look at what's happening in Ariana's chart in the summer of 2019, she had a once-in-a-lifetime transit. That it's so rare that some people never have it. If you do have it, it's once in a lifetime. It lasts about 18 months, 12 to 18 months. She had Neptune opposite her moon. A very difficult transit. So the moon is our emotional world. When Neptune opposes the moon, I equate this to emotionally feeling like you are dropped off in the Atlantic Ocean at 3 a.m. There's not even moonlight. There's nothing. There's no light anywhere. It's 3 a.m. It's dark. You're dropped off. There's no land around you, and you're just treading water. And you have this feeling that you're like, I have nothing to hold on to. I can't see anything. I'm scared for my life. I don't know what's going to happen. That's what was happening for her emotionally at that time. Neptune opposing the moon is difficult because Neptune dissolves whatever it comes in contact with. So when you have this transit, there's a part of you emotionally that feels very unhappy. But the issue is that because Neptune confuses you, you can't identify what it is. So all you know is that something feels off, but I don't know what. And if you don't know what, then you don't even know how to solve it. It's very demoralizing, very confusing time.
Well, that makes sense because she is in a happy relationship. She even says, I love you so much to Tom, but yet she's been so unhappy.
Yeah, and one thing that I think happened looking back at 2020, the first few months of 2020, end of 2019, beginning of 2020, by then she had Saturn forming a very positive aspect to her Venus. So I suspect that by end of 2019, beginning of 2020, more stability, especially in her relationship with Tom, happened. And then, as we move into 2022, she's going to have Uranus trining her moon. That's going to give her a jolt of energy that'll make her feel creative and alive again. So this Neptune thing is over. I would say by March, April 2020, it's on its way out.
Cool.
And then 2022 especially will be a very good year for her because by then all these problematic transits are gone and she'll have this really exciting Uranus energy giving her a really nice jolt.
Aww, we love Ariana.
We do.
Love her.
And Tom. I mean, as a couple, I think they're fantastic.
Yeah.
I personally love them.
Yeah. Andy, this has been so much fun. I mean, I personally have learned so much. I find it really interesting here about the composites and how the relationship stuff. Where can people find you online if they either just want to, I know you put up a lot of content, every day you do selfie videos and you talk about what's going on in the planets. Where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram at Astrology with Andy, and you can book a reading. I have 10 different kind of readings that I do depending on what you need. And you can find me at astrologywithandy.com.
Perfect. And how often do you recommend somebody get a reading?
No sooner than every 12 months, every 12 to 18 months. Because
Okay.
when you do a reading with me, we talk about what's happening for the next 12 to 18 months.
Cool.
If you come back to me 3 months later, I have nothing new to share with
Yeah.
you, really. So, you know,
Yeah.
when you do a reading with me, it's very in-depth, very detailed. I mean, I have people who take notes and tell me they have 9 pages of notes after our
Wow.
readings.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Amazing. All right. Astrology with Andy, and you will definitely be back. We're actually planning to because we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Andy and I are so close. We're going to do some top 10 Brittany and Christina
I can't wait.
episodes.
I cannot wait.
So those will be like special gifts for you guys.
Yeah. I've been working on that list, by the way. It's like a PhD.
yeah.
I've devoted so much time to it. I can't wait.
All right, guys. You can follow Out in the Wild podcast. I'm Jess XNYC, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, guys.